So let's go ahead and get started. All developers need is a browser. How to be more productive by having less. So in this webinar, Victor Farsik is going to try to prove to you that there's no need to install an IDE, compilers, CLIs, Docker, etc. You can actually be more productive without all of those things. So with that, I will hand it over to Victor. Good luck, Victor.
Thank you. Okay, I'll go full screen first. No, how do I do this? Pin, yes. Okay, so the whole idea, actually not the idea. Let's start with the problem. Actually, first introduction. My name is Victor. You probably saw me before. I work for Codefresh, all that stuff, right? Go to Codefresh, codefresh.io. Now, going back to the subject. Typically, it is a painful process, at least depending on how you define, to have everything that you need to develop something, right? You need to install an IDE, you need to install compilers, you need to install a bunch of tools, you need to create virtual machines, probably a local Kubernetes cluster, or maybe a remote cluster. And then once you're done, and let's say that you're doing that for Node.js, then somebody else comes and says, hey, how about working on this project in Go? And then it starts over and over and over again. And it is essentially, when you look at the technologies and what we have available to us right now, it's potentially a wrong approach that I need to worry about all those things and basically set up everything that I need for my development on my machine when we are living in an age of cloud where basically we're using services for almost everything else except normally, typically for local development. So what I will try to do now is to go through a few options. It will be mostly hands-on on how we can do this and that, how we can basically ditch our laptops. I mean, actually, that's wrong. Not ditch our laptops. You need a way to do stuff. You need a machine, but honestly, all you realistically need is a browser because everything is cloud-based, web-based, what's or not. And theoretically, you could switch from one machine to another. You could go to your friend's house, and then when there is a problem, you just work on his computer. It doesn't really matter because everything is somewhere, in clouds over there above us, right? Like last time, when was that? Last time I traveled, actually, I ended up having to work on something. I had only my tablet, fire the tablet, you have everything, and no need for having anything installed. And that's a pep talk. Now let me share the screen again because I'm going to jump straight into what I want to show you. So what I will try to simulate in a way, I mean, do a demo of, is how would I do everything I need to do with one of my applications without ever touching anything except browser. And all that is going to be actually fairly easy, straightforward, what's not. So I need essentially two things, right? I need an environment in which I will develop my application, in which I will do some initial round of testing, in which I will preview my application, and so on and so forth. And then once I'm ready with that feature, whatever that something is, I need to be able to push that to Git and then somehow auto-magically it will be deployed to staging, production, what's or not, right? The full lifecycle, simplified version of a lifecycle of application from the moment I have an idea that I want to do something all the way until it is running in production. And you already saw those talks. You already heard people doing the same thing. What is going to be slightly different today is that I will do all that with browser without really installing anything, without doing anything. Think of this as, imagine that I just bought a computer which has nothing installed in it except Chrome. So what did I do before this demo, before this session? I have a Kubernetes cluster, and the only thing that I installed in Kubernetes cluster is Argo CD. You will see later why Argo CD, actually very soon, why Argo CD is important. But basically, apart from that, I have nothing else except a few of Git repositories that I have of my applications and of my environments. So, and those repositories are actually this one. This is the repo of my application. It's a simple Hugo application, nothing really groundbreaking, nothing really special. And this one is a repository that defines my production, the applications that should be running in production, whatever those applications are. It could be that I created those repositories. It could be that some of my colleagues created those repositories, or it could be that I'm just right now going to work on an open source project. Theoretically, it does not matter who created the repo, who maintains the repo. The point is that I should be able, without having anything prepared, to work on any repository and still have all the tools that I need. So let's start with production. I'm going to reverse the order things. At the very end of this demo, I will get to deploying to production, but first I'm going to start from production just to have the initial setup of whatever I need. And to do that, basically, what I did is I installed the Chrome extension. One of the tools that I will use is called Gitpod, and I installed the Chrome extension for that. It's a service. Just go to gitpod.io, you will see it. And basically, I have this repo, and I would like to use whatever is in this repository to install the applications in my production, right? So I'm just going to click the button. I click the button, and what is happening right now is that Gitpod as a service is trying to figure out what do I need to work with this repository, right? There are a couple of files that you might want to create that would help Gitpod do the better job. I will show you later those files. But for now, it is, you can see from the message, which is actually very small. Let me make it bigger. It is pulling Docker images. So it figured out what needs to be done. It is pulling an image. Before that, it probably built an image based on the tools that I have in that I might need to work, and depending on the type of files in that repo. And now it is pulling that image, and here we are, right? This is, all the time I'm in browser, nothing else. This is, if you're familiar with Visual Studio Code, this is almost the same. This is browser version. It's called Thea, actually. It's a spin-off of Visual Studio Code. And basically, I have everything I need to run in this, to use this repo, right? Or development environment, or whatever that something is. You can see the files on my left. You can see a README open here. And there is a terminal here at the bottom, right? Now, to prove you, and trust me, I did not set up this in advance. Only a few configurations that I will show you later. If I do this, let's say kubectl -- namespace production get pods, you will see that it figured out, based on a few settings, where is my production cluster. It installed the applications that are defined in this repository. And if I go here, you will see that Helm templates, there is this application is defined, DevOps Paradox. So when it created a workspace, it initiated some processes, and this application is running 66 seconds ago. It's important to see this time. I'm not cheating. I did not do this in advance. It deployed the application to production. It prepared everything I need to work with it, right? Now, I will jump, I'm going to get back to production in a while later. Now, let me jump back to, not back, forward to the application that I want now to work with. And this is called Gitpod demo. It's a Hugo application, nothing really special, source code of application, tests, if any, all that jazz, that stuff that you normally have in your applications, right? Doesn't matter what language is, doesn't matter what's inside, because it's all based on containers. Containers can basically have almost any set of tools. It's mostly about the ability of Gitpod to figure out what you need with or without your help, and create the whole development environment somewhere in cloud over there that will contain everything we need. And let's see that whether I will get everything I need to work with this application.
Victor, would this be a good time for a couple questions?
Oh yeah, shoot, anytime. Anytime is good
All
to interrupt,
right.
Victor.
Manesh says he uses Gitpod, but since he started using Mozilla Developer Edition, it doesn't redirect to any repository and he can't open them on the second page. He can view them on the home page though. He says he's even tried with every browser settings, including allowing pop-ups, and nothing worked. Even Chrome isn't able to do this for him. Do you have any suggestions?
Not really, because I don't use much Mozilla myself. But what happened here? I can double check how that works.
He
I
said
haven't been using
he's
Mozilla
tried
myself.
with every browser also. So just if you
With
have
every
any
browser.
suggestions.
Wait, let me see the message. How do I see the
So
messages?
if you look, yeah, your toolbar might be hidden when you're a presenter, but there's a Q&A button on the toolbar.
Yeah, we're also streaming, so you can, welcome to the webinar. Please enter my questions. Where are the, I see the chat. Is it in chat?
Yeah, you see the chat, but not the questions. Yeah.
This is Victor not being good with technology. That's what's happening over here. Q&A, yes, Q&A. But since I started using Mozilla Developer, it doesn't redirect to any repository. I can't open them on second page. I haven't experienced that. So I don't have an answer. This is very embarrassing. I'm so sorry. But if you ping me later afterwards, I can try to reproduce and figure out what's happening there in your case, if that sounds okay.
Victor's at @vfarsic if you want to ping him, by the way, on Twitter.
Yeah.
So sorry we couldn't answer that particular case for you, Manesh. I do have one more question from Martin. Is the price of the tools you present more or less expensive than buying a dev laptop every 3 years?
That depends really on quantity of how much you work and what's not. There is a free plan that I use heavily. I mean, heavily. Now, let's be honest. I don't do 8 hours of work on average of day in Gitpod, but there is a free plan with a decent amount of hours, and then you would, if you need more than that, you would need to pay. Gitpod.io. Let's check the pricing right away. If I find out how. Gitpod pricing. Here we are, pricing Gitpod. I remember that I forgot how much it is, but yeah, personal is like 8 hours. There is a free, which gives you 50 hours a month, which is basically over a week of 8 hours of work. 100 hours per month is 8, and then unlimited hours 23. So it's fairly reasonable, I think. Now, it's not only about the cost versus laptop. I mean, it's cheaper than your laptop, right? But you will have laptop. It's not that much of a question whether you will have laptop, but you don't need a powerful laptop. And more importantly, I think that the major benefit of Gitpod is that it enables collaboration, that basically anybody can work on any project without really having to spend time figuring out how to work on that project, you know, which tools you need and what's not. Now, if you're a specialist, you work only 8 hours a day on a single project, that's your project, you're going most likely to install things you need on your laptop. But if you work with more than one, at least I personally find it very useful because it removes the time that I need to spend trying to figure out, and especially in my case, because I work also a lot on open source, hey, I just click a button and I get what I need. Not necessarily 100%, but I might need to change a few configuration settings, which I'll show you later. Okay. And then there is Paolo, I think so. No, David, so Gitpod is similar to the GitHub offer. What is the difference? I still haven't, they haven't accepted my request to enter into the beta program for GitHub Spaces, assuming that that's what you're referring to, David. So I cannot compare, unfortunately. And as far as I know, it's still closed beta. And Paolo says, do you have comparative between Gitpod and other IDE browser providers? From my experience, I'm not only using IDE when in our way office, but carry an iPad on my pocket. The two that I use most heavily is Gitpod and what is the other one? Now my mind stopped. You see, that's what happens with old age. When you get over 40, brain doesn't work anymore. It will come back to me, but I use Gitpod and one more, which for whatever reason I cannot remember anymore. And I prefer
suggested
Gitpod.
Cloud9 in the chat. Is it Cloud9?
No, it's not Cloud9. It's not Cloud9. It will get back to me. Let me find my notes. I will do it right away. I have it somewhere in README. That's when you're old, then you figure out everything through READMEs. I'll find it out. Let's do it right away. Where are you? Oh, here. If I don't find it in a couple of minutes, I'll give up. I cannot find it. I don't know. See, old.
We will find it for you later, Paolo.
Exactly.
And let you know. And then Mike has one more question in the chat.
Sure. Is Gitpod the development environment in a cloud? Is it DevOps to existing backends? If it's the first, which development environments? Anything that's packaged how? A container, Kubernetes, Docker, VMs? What happens when internet is down? Oh, there's many questions. Brilliant. So yes, Gitpod is in a way replacement for what you traditionally do on your laptops, right? It's in cloud, and it's basically evaluating what you have in your Git repositories and creating. Basically, what it does is that behind the scenes, it is running on top of Kubernetes, and it creates a pod with a container that is built based on an image built based on your specifications, so that it contains all the tools and settings that you might need. There are predefined environments, and you can extend them, and I will show you soon how, with whatever additional stuff you might or might not need. And then, so I think that's answering your question. How's that packed? Yeah, it's a container. Everything is a container today. And that container, all the containers today are running on top of Kubernetes. So it's a container and it's Kubernetes, but that's behind the scenes. You're not really interacting directly with it. You're interacting, as I showed you, unless it's open source. And this is another brilliant thing. You can choose to host it yourself. I'm using a service, but you can host it yourself. And now, what happens when the internet is down? Now, it really depends. In my case, when internet is down, I cannot do almost anything, no matter whether I'm using Gitpod or I'm not. Kind of today, at least in my world, everything is on internet. My GitHub repositories are on internet. My services are on internet. My servers are I mean, when I say internet, are reachable through network. So I'm lost without internet, no matter with or without Gitpod. At best, I can just, I cannot even watch movies anymore without internet, right? There is absolutely nothing. I need to download some Netflix on my phone to be able to do anything. And DNS is stormed. Yes, I mean, you know, if those things happen, no internet, if DNS is stormed and so on and so forth, we have a problem. But I think that that's a problem that is much wider than Gitpod. The same thing happens if those things happen with your, I don't know, if you're using AWS for your infrastructure, or Azure, or what's not. Okay, I see no more questions. Oh, so that's what happened to Parler.
There are a lot of questions, actually. We have a couple more, cool. Victor, but if you want to keep answering them, or you can continue and we can break in a couple minutes, whatever you want to do.
Hey, if you keep asking questions, that means that you want me to keep answering them. So I do whatever you want.
All right, so I'm going to jump back to the Q&A. Oh yeah, you can see them now. Go ahead.
Yeah, they were on AWS and Bezos shut them off and they couldn't access their source code. Yes, I mean, those things happen. Cannot really speak in the name of Bezos. Okay, so keep them coming. Yeah, Tarin will interrupt me if I'm not going to watch them now because I'm going to switch to the screen. Interrupt me at any moment. So where was I? Now, this is a problem, again, with old age. I don't remember where I was. Yes, so I got this, what you see on screen right now, which is basically, let me make that bigger. I hope that if you want me to increase the resolution, let me know. So basically, all my files from the repository are cloned here. This is the editor, right? This is my terminal at the bottom. And this is the application, and it is already running in preview mode. It started. I can see what's going on with my application here. So basically, I have everything I need. Now, that being said, let me just move this. Let's see a few things that I need to do. One thing that I will do, and that is I'm going to go now, switch to Codefresh. Think of this as preparation, because soon I will start simulating development. But once I'm finished with the development, I want CI/CD pipelines to take over that and maybe create a release and deploy to production, what's or not. And what is important here, or curious, is that this is also part of the Git-pod definition. This one here, Git-pod demo master, this job did not exist until like 10 minutes ago, until I started answering questions. It is all part of the setup of that repository. And among other things, it created a job for me. And this job is here. It will do whatever. I'm not going to go deep now into pipelines. This is not a session about pipelines, except that it can interact with other services and create whatever I need at that very moment to develop. And I just said, hey, I might need later on when working on this project to have a pipeline. So it created a pipeline. I will need to add this variable. You will need to give me a second here, mostly because I'm not prepared. Where is, now this is a tricky part because I need to add, put my GitHub secret, GitHub token, and I don't want you to see it. Close your eyes, everybody, close your eyes. There we go. Okay. So I'm editing my GitHub token so that Codefresh can speak with GitHub account that I have, and you will see later why all that is happening. So going back to Gitpod, right? It created my pipeline. It compiled my code. It created a preview of my environment. It checked out the code. Everything is basically ready. Now, where was I? Wrong one. Here we are. Okay. So how did all this happen, right? As I said before, you can Gitpod can figure out some common things. So for example, you can figure out whether your code is based on Go, let's say, and it will put the tools that you traditionally need when working with Go or Java or .NET or what's not, right? It tries to be clever. It has some predefined scenarios, but those scenarios might not be always everything you need. And when that happens, like in my case, because there is no predefined workspace for Hugo application, that's why I actually use Hugo in this one. I helped in a way Gitpod to do a better job. And the way how I helped Gitpod is through two files, like gitpod.yaml and gitpod docker file. So if I go to gitpod.yaml, this is basically, think of this as initialization script. Whenever it creates workspace, if I need more, I can specify it in this file, and this file is executed when the workspace is created, when your development environment is created. And in this case, I have a make file. It could be anything you want, basically, that creates the pipeline that I showed you before. It starts my Hugo server. Here we are. And as a result, it figured out, and this is now Gitpod figuring out without me saying much, it figured out that there is a process running on port 1313. And if you see the address here, that's how it opened this preview, right? It figured out that somebody's listening on, projecting on port 1313 and open browser on my right side. And then there is Gitpod Docker file. This is in case you need tools that are not already available one way or another. Like, you know, Git compilers, this and that, all those things are available out of the box. But if you need more, like I needed for Hugo, then you can define that in .gitpod.docker file, which will do the stuff you need. Like in this case, I'm just installing Hugo and what else? And I'm installing Codefresh CLI, because those are the two things that are not thought of by the Gitpod team, right? Workspaces. So I extended what it can do by bringing additional stuff into it, and I do that through Docker file. So those are the two critical files, basically. Now, if I go here and say, let's say, I'm going to simulate that I'm writing code, and don't judge me for this. I know that this is not serious. Let's say that if I'm now simulating that I'm doing development by changing to this is silly, and save that. And imagine that I just spent a couple of hours working on a new feature, whatever. I can preview it here. You can see the results immediately. And you can continue working, right? You could have a script that would run your tests here locally. I mean, when I say locally to the workspace, and do basically everything that you do when you develop stuff. Now imagine that a couple of hours passed, maybe even a full day if I'm very slow today, and I finished working on that new feature. And then what is the next thing you do? You would add those changes. You would commit those changes. This is silly. And you would push those changes to your Git repository, right? And this is basically the part where you're finished, give or take, what you normally do when you develop locally, right? And after that, assuming that you're doing the right thing, after that you have some CI or CD or whatever you want to call them, some pipelines that will take over what you're doing and maybe build some binaries, maybe build some container images, maybe push those images to registry, and so on and so forth. And that pipeline, if I didn't make a mistake so far, should be running right now. And it is, right? Because this is a pipeline that was created by when I created the workspace in Gitpod. And the reason why it was created is because I configured it to create it. It's a single line of command. It's a single command. And it is running a pipeline as a result of me pushing something to Git once I finished with simulation of local development. In this case, the left side of the pipeline is something that you already probably all do. Like I'm cloning the repositories, I'm building some binaries, I'm building container image and pushing it to registry. Now the right side is a bit special. I mean, special. It's a commonly used thing today, but not necessarily something that everybody's doing. And basically what I'm trying to do here is to deploy to production. Now, this is based on GitHub's principles, in this case, at least this example, meaning that when I want to deploy to production, I will not do kubectl apply and then connect to my server and do stuff, right? In this case, this account doesn't have access to my cluster, doesn't need to have access to the cluster. Instead, what it is doing, it will create a pull request in the repository that defines production, the one that I started with at the very beginning of this session, and it will have suggested changes for production, and then somebody can review that pull request and somebody can merge that pull request. And once the pull request is merged, then it will be deployed, because Argo CD in this case is monitoring my Git repository and waiting for somebody to change the desired state. So here is my production repository. If I haven't made a mistake, there is a pull request here. It was created a few minutes ago by my pipeline, and pipeline was executed because I finished working on a feature using Gitpod Workspace. And that pull request has a single file. In this case, it says, hey, somebody would like to deploy the first release of an application called Gitpod Demo CF. Second release would be updated to this file, but this is the first time I'm going to deploy this application to production. So it's a completely new file. What matters is that I'm redefining what is the desired state, what is the contents of a Git repository that defines production. And I did that as creating a pull request through a pipeline initiated through Gitpod Workspace. So if I go here, I can do whatever you're doing with pull requests. I will skip doing all that, writing comments like this is stupid and whatever you do in comments. And I'm going to merge the pull request. And as a result of merging a pull request, Argo CD, who is configured now to monitor this repository, and it is configured as a result of me creating Gitpod Workspace in the first place. That's all part of initialization scripts. And soon it will deploy. Here we are. It appeared right now. You need to trust me. This is the application. It just appeared here because in this case, Argo CD, GitHub space, blah, 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 deployment mechanism, figured out that I changed the definition of production, and it is deploying it right now, or it will deploy it soon. If I go back to my Gitpod, this is the workspace for the production, right? The first one I created, not the one for application. If I do get pods, there we are. There are 2 pods running. Now, I obviously made a mistake somewhere, which I will not try, not try now, waste your time trying to debug. There is probably something wrong with the image I built and pushed to container registry. Not me, actually, a pipeline. But imagine that you haven't seen error image pool and that it worked and that Victor didn't make a mistake during the demo. And my application is deployed and that's it. And then I continue with my day. I can continue developing, do whatever I want to do, run locally, preview locally to the workspace, not locally to my laptop, push, pipeline, does whatever needs to be done, redefines staging production, whichever repository that has the state of my cluster, Argo CD pulls that information and does whatever it needs to do, and then repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat. And when you're finished, you just close the tab, and that's about it. That whole workspace, everything will be removed after a while of inactivity. When you need to come back to work again, maybe you went for a lunch or whatever, within like 5 seconds, you will have your whole development environment recreated again, right? So it's temporary by purpose, by design, and it gets created, destroyed, depending on what you're doing at some given moment. And that's I finished faster than I thought I will finish. I tend to plan to speak slowly and then I always speak fast, but that will give me more time for discussion, which is not necessarily a bad thing. So are there any more questions?
We do have more questions, Victor.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
So in the Q&A, I have a couple questions from a little earlier as well. So Manesh says we've learned in our whole since our professional childhood that clouds slow down the process. Web app is slower than native development. Is this similarly applicable for development platforms?
I don't think it's, I mean, there is always some slowness when things travel through network, but I think that it's not 1999 anymore. We all have decent bandwidth in home and offices and so on and so forth. I don't have, I mean, I work almost exclusively in cloud these days. All my clusters are somewhere in cloud, whether that's AWS, Azure, DigitalOcean, Vultr, Linode, whom did I miss? Google Cloud, doesn't matter. Everything is somewhere out there. My repositories are also in cloud. It's in GitHub, right? My development environments are in cloud as well, in this case in Gitpod, and so on and so forth. Everything is online today. Is it slower than working locally? Yes. Will you notice the difference of a few milliseconds? No. Sorry. Unless you have really, really bad low bandwidth of your connection. No, you will not notice the difference. I mean, you see, I'm now scrolling this file up and down, up and down. It works fine. I honestly don't notice the difference. The only kind of disclaimer is that I have decently good bandwidth. But I doubt that with having lower bandwidth, that would be a problem because it's really not much information flowing between you and, in this case, Gitpod or whatever else it is. And as a matter of fact, it can increase your performance. Now, when I think about it, because, hey, it really depends on what type of laptop you have. I have laptop and desktop. Like in my laptop has 16 gigs of memory. If I need, for example, a multi-node cluster and I start creating, I don't know, 2-3 nodes with kind, that's going to grind it to a halt. It's going to use all my memory and CPU. In cloud, we theoretically have unlimited resources. Now, there is always a cost involved in that, but it could be even faster. It really depends on your use case. But I don't think that speed is the reason to go for cloud or no in general. There might be other reasons, but speed is not one of them.
All right, and the next question is from Julian. Do you know if Git pods work with VS Code's dev containers? They are Docker containers where VS Code opens the current project.
I don't know. I'm not 100% sure what is dev containers, to be honest. But from your description, it sounds like basically doing the same thing what Gitpod is doing. From your description, I haven't used it. I'm not sure what dev containers are. I can Google it, but it would be embarrassing now if I Google the answer. So I'm not enough experience with dev containers.
All right, and from Paulo, the blue-green deployments on Kubernetes using the Codefresh plugin has a great solution on their environments. Would moving to GitOps, I'm sorry, let me see, move to GitOps, which would be the impact to adopt it? I'm not sure I quite understand that question. Do you?
I think I do. So, and if you notice, Paulo, that I speak some random nonsense that has nothing to do with your question, that means that I didn't. So it doesn't have the impact really on the using GitOps doesn't necessarily have impact in a way how you deploy. The impact is more about the direction of sending instructions. So to deploy blue-green or any other type, right? Traditionally, you would do kubectl this or that, Helm this and that, either directly or through some helper steps, like in this case in pipelines, right? But basically, you are explicitly instructing Kubernetes to do something, to create a resource of kind, or update it or delete it. Now with GitOps, and the problem with all that is that you're basically you do not know the state, the desired state of your cluster. Your cluster is whatever it is, right? With GitOps, the whole idea is that we do everything. Everything is defined as code today, and that applies to the state of your cluster. So the whole idea is, hey, you need to store something in Git first for that something to be applied to the cluster. And the rest is more or less the same. It's just that if you use like Argo CD or Flux, for example, your cluster will pull the information about what needs to happen instead of you pushing information to the cluster what you want to do. So it's, I think, in a way, almost imperative versus declarative type of approaching but the short answer is no, whatever your process is, doesn't matter with Codefresh, something else to do blue-green or any other deployment process, that's not impacted because that's happening after Kubernetes receives information what should happen.
All right, and our next question from Peter, is there an option to run Gitpod in a private cloud environment like a private Redshift?
Yes, Gitpod is open source. You can, let me actually find it very quickly, Gitpod open source, right? So this is Gitpod, no, this is actually not, this is the blog. First result was not the correct one. Here you are, right? This is Gitpod.io, Gitpod repository in GitHub. You can take it and run it yourself, right? I am using their SaaS service because I was too lazy to run it myself. But yes, you can run it in your cluster under your rules, whatever they are, completely isolated from the rest or not isolated, self-managed or SaaS. It's your decision. What matters is that Gitpod is open source, available to everybody, and you can choose to use open source or you can choose to use the service. And in this case, and by the way, I'm not paid by Gitpod. I just like the tool. That's why I'm promoting it, only likeness. So yeah, you choose whether you want a service or you want to run it yourself, and then you pick open source, do whatever you need to do with it.
Thanks, Victor. We have a few more questions, and thank you, George, for all your comments in the chat. Those are all really interesting, and we appreciate your feedback as well. From Peter, oh, I just answered Peter, sorry. From Musa, how do you bootstrap your cluster application with this framework?
I'm not sure I understood the question, Musa. So I'm going to start answering randomly, and you correct me in Q&A whether I understood it right or no, right? Your your cluster, your cluster is not really involved unless you're self-hosting Gitpod, right? So if you install Gitpod yourself instead of using SaaS, then it's slightly different story. Then you just install it and follow the instructions. But after that comes the same process like what I'm experiencing with SaaS. And that's basically, you create a workspace, they call it workspace, which is an environment of sorts based on a specific repository. And it will either try to figure out what that repository is, like what is the type of programming language. If it's Go, then I will do this. If it's Java, I will do that, and so on and so forth. Or you can do what I did and help it a bit. If it doesn't do exactly what you want, you can define how to extend its bootstrapping, let's say, through gitpod.yaml, like what I did here, right? Okay, so I want you to run this make init script, and I want you to, on top of whatever you're doing, to run Hugo server, which basically gives me this preview. So it's .gitpod.yaml, and for the tools you need, if they're not already included, and majority is included out of the box, if they're not included, then you create .gitpod.dockerfile. And those two files, Gitpod, when you create a workspace, will look for them in the repo that you chose to create workspace on or based on. Hope that answered the question. If I misunderstood the question, just let me know and I'll give it another try.
And we have another question from Paulo. Sorry, Paulo, this one was from earlier on. I just scrolled below it. Let me make sure, I hope I understood this correctly. If not, please correct me. So he asks, he says, I understand the Git Power Pod. So my solution has many components with different repositories, but does building my local environment test require much more work? So building the services, ingress, etc.
That really depends on the use case. Sometimes things are simple, sometimes things are not. I've been working with companies where basically creating an environment is a piece of cake, and then the benefits of Gitpod are more that mobility than really setup. And I've worked with companies that everybody has uniform things, right? And then on the other hand, I've worked with other extreme where newcomer to a company needs to spend I don't know, like a week, sometimes two. It sounds silly, but I've seen it happen. And 2 weeks after, few weeks of waiting for special laptop or whatever. So it really depends from one use case to another how much this is helpful or not helpful. And this is all assuming that we're talking about a single project or a few projects. Now, in my case, there are those additional benefits because I very often jump into basically random projects like the company Codefresh where I work on. There are different teams, and sometimes I jump in and need to do something because I personally, this is personal, I don't like the culture of, hey, this is your job, you need to do it. If I need something in some repo, I'm going to go there and do whatever needs to be done, right? And for me, it's very helpful to be able to jump from one type of project to another without really polluting my laptop with random stuff like, oh, this project is Node.js. Okay, let me install Node.js. It's been 3 years last time I worked with Node.js, so let me refresh my memory. I don't want to do that anymore. I just want to click a button and things happen. And this is a general logic, I think. I'm not even talking about now development environment. I don't want to deal with servers. I want to click a button and I get the server. I don't want to deal with the clusters. I want to click a button. When I say a button, actually, if you don't know me, I really want to say execute a script. But and things happen, right? I want things to be simple because every minute that I'm not spending working on what I'm supposed to do is a minute wasted, at least in my head, right? And setting up environments, creating clusters, creating servers, creating this, creating that is a waste. It's not really helping me. And what I really, really want to do is write code. That's the only thing that I want to do. And I believe that almost everybody working in this industry should be focusing close to 100% on writing code, and everything else is just happening somehow.
Awesome, and I found one more question hiding in the chat here. Let's see, can Codefresh integrate also with other case tools without coding?
Depends what the other tools are, really. Some some integrations are out of the box, click, and you get it. Some integrations might require coding, as in, but when I say coding, it's a single command. Like, hey, nobody thought of integration with some strange stuff. You need to invoke its API and then send you URL request or something like that. So I don't know whether running a command is considered coding, or running. I'm not even sure whether you consider writing YAML coding, right? If writing YAML is coding, then yeah, you might need to do a bit of coding, few lines. If by coding you mean writing some Go application or Java stuff, and YAML and shell scripts is not coding, then no coding required at all.
All right, that's all of our questions for now. If one just popped in, just kidding. From Manesh, can we run 3D modules and get output in Gitpod? For example, Pygame opens its own window.
I would like to know that as well. Gaming is one of the things that I'm always jealous that I'm not in that world. So I don't have practical experience. That's so much more interesting than what I'm doing. But I have no practical experience with any type of gaming, so I cannot answer that question.
If anyone does, please answer in the chat. And also another question from George, do you have templates for configuring the environment for all devs on the team or within an org?
So templates are, yes, for everything. Basically, the way how I work is that absolutely everything is defined as code and stored in a Git repository or multiple repositories. So the answer is a huge yes. I'm very strongly against anybody doing random stuff. So anybody creating a server by clicking a button without defining it in a Git repository is bad. Anybody SSHing into a server and doing random stuff is bad. Yes, I have definition of absolutely everything. There is not a single thing that I'm doing that is not defined somewhere in one way or another. Configured, defined, stored. And when I say stored, I mean Git exclusively.
Thank you. And Manesh asks, he says he would even like to know the difference between Replit and Gitpod, if possible.
Oh, tough questions today. I don't know Replit either. What is Replit? Okay. Yes, now I know it, but I don't have enough experience with it. And what I'm going to do right now, because it's an interesting subject that I want to explore more, is that I'm going to put it. I just put it in my README, and I will create some material about it soon, without committing to a date. Probably video, maybe another webinar. I'm not sure, but not enough experience to answer that yet with Replit.
All right, that's all of our questions for now. I'll allow just a couple more minutes for those to come in and remind everybody to check out codefresh.io/events for our next upcoming webinars, including Victor's next webinar on Helm versus Customize. And actually, I see a question in the chat. What is the DevOps toolkit while you're on the page here, Victor?
Yeah, so DevOpstoolkitseries.com. Let me post it here in chat, the address. Basically, I published a few books and courses like random tooling, chaos engineering, canary deployments, continuous deployment, monitoring, logging, Kubernetes, stuff like that. I have like 6-7 books and courses under my tool belt. So I was too lazy, to be honest, to prepare to write a new demo application. So I used my personal website as a demo app for this completely unrelated webinar.
So go check out the DevOps Toolkit if that sounds interesting to you, and Victor's podcast, the DevOps Paradox podcast as well. And if you have any questions for Victor, or we missed a question that we didn't get back to, you can find him on Twitter at @vfarsic. I just added that to the chat. So let's see, I'm just checking out the comments here in the chat. And Mike just said there's a great need for a presentation tutorial environment that allows training development, but it would have to cover many development environments. Do you see Gitpod would meet this need?
Yes, basically there is no real limit, because today basically almost anything can run in a container, right? The exception could be, and now I'm treading the waters that I'm not that involved, maybe some iOS development, probably not. Maybe some weird old cases in Windows. Actually, Windows containers are a thing anymore. So maybe some UI, desktop UI development. But if you exclude those cases, it's a huge yes, because basically anything can run in a container these days. Almost anything can run in a container, and if it can be packaged as a container, Gitpod is a good solution. Basically, Gitpod helps you do the heavy lifting, of creating a container, figuring out where to run it, whether there is available memory, CPU, stuff like that, creating, destroying stuff. So it simplifies those things. But if it can run on Windows or Linux, then it can run in a container. If it can run in a container, then there you are. It can work in a Gitpod.
And is there any Python specific setup not related? Oh, sorry, I read that incorrectly. Is there any Python specific setup not mentioned in Gitpod docs till the date related to Python development?
Yeah, let me double check. I'm not sure because you caught me again. I'm not a Python. I mean, I developed in Python for probably like 5-6 years, but that was a long time ago. So yeah, here are some of the examples. They have four different examples here. You can all open them, and basically, and this is what I did for this demo as well. You go to something closest, and if it doesn't do exactly what you need it to do, then you can modify it, extend it. And I'm now really going out of my ways because I haven't been working in Python for long, but let's say this one, right? This is just yet another repository, right? It is based on a repository, the demo repository they created, Python, and probably something will happen here in a second or two. So yeah. And now it's always a question here, Flask, and I don't even know what Flask is. That was probably something before my days in Python, but there you go. And then if it doesn't do exactly what you need, you just change gitpod.yaml and modify it to do, or gitpod.dockerfile if you need additional tools, and that's about it. So yes, Python, big yes. Basically anything except iOS.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Victor, and thank you to everyone who's watching for all your questions. I apologize if we missed a comment or a question in the chat. Like I said, please reach out to Victor at vFarsic, and he will be happy to answer those. And let's see, I think we might have time, though, for one more question that just came in. What do you say, Victor?
Yeah. I haven't tried KEM or KVM emulation for device development, so that's going to be a quick answer. Let's put it this way: if there is an emulation that can run in a container, then the answer is yes. And I don't know the answer myself.
Awesome. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you to Victor for this Codefresh live webinar. We hope to see you all at the next webinar, maybe Helm versus Customize. And yeah, please reach out to us if you have any questions. I will send the recording tomorrow, and so you can also reply to that email that just comes directly from my email address if you have any additional questions that you would like to ask Victor. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Cheers.